Uh,
It's Michael Wilk for the Wilk Report, and Larry Bernard coming to us from Florida. How are you doing today, Larry?
Pretty good.
All right, awesome. Yeah, you did tell me about your gum
Infection.
infection.
Hopefully that. Yeah, a little bit of a thing that knocked me out on Friday, and kind of pushed myself a little bit yesterday, and I've been mostly.
Yeah, you're kind of cutting out right now. A little bit of technical difficulties with Larry's microphone, so we'll try and get through this. But before we start on our Orville review, I wanted to go in a little bit about something going on with Viacom, because they are looking into purchasing. Whoops, on the wrong tab here. They are looking
Pluto Nash TV.
Yeah, Pluto Nash TV, which is
Pluto Nash.
Yeah, Viacom agrees to buy ad-supported streaming service Pluto TV for $340 million. The all-cash deal, expected to close this quarter, marks Viacom's latest effort to jump into the streaming market.
Give me just a second here. I have a small animal in my broadcast area I need to take care of.
Oh, hello, kitty. Yeah, there's a nice CEO of Viacom CEO Bob Bakish, who looks far too much like Harvey Weinstein for my comfort level. But yeah, so let me go ahead and read this while Larry's.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Had a physical.
Yeah, well, it's called having pets, so it happens. But all right, so. Yeah, so we've got
Pluto TV.
Yeah, Pluto TV. We've got Viacom has agreed to acquire streaming service Pluto TV for $340 million in cash, the latest piece of its strategy to build a streaming business as consumers cut the cord. But I'm a little fuzzy on why they're doing this, because they already own MTV, Comedy Central, VH1, and if they're going to be acquiring CBS this year, as rumors have reported, it seems like why would they be doing this if they're going to be getting all access anyway?
Well, first things first, Pluto TV has a special relationship with both Roku and the PlayStation Network. So that gives CBS...
Okay, just cut out a little bit there. Yeah, so that gives CBS a bit of an advantage then, or what?
Yeah, because, they're streaming on... People have a Roku box plugged into their TV. People have a PlayStation plugged into their TV. So they'll have 3 different avenues to distribute with.
Okay, so as opposed to like maybe 1 or 2. Yeah, because an interesting thing on the CNBC article is that it says Pluto TV is a free ad-supported service that's given over-the-top viewers a video option that doesn't require a cable subscription or monthly payments to Netflix. The transaction is expected to close in the first quarter, and this was as of January 22nd. So yeah, but yeah, it also says it could help in the acquisition in future negotiations with pay TV distributors. So it's like they plan. I guess Viacom's got plans to let carriers like Comcast and Charter offer the service for their broadband-only customers. So.
And also, doesn't Viacom have a video game division? Let me check that out here.
I don't know, but it says in the article, Viacom shares have fallen more than 50% over the past 5 years, as many of its signature channels have failed to churn out hit shows that resonate with younger audience. To stay relevant in an on-demand world, Viacom is offering content in a variety of forms, including free services and special subscription offerings. The company is widely expected to begin merger discussions with CBS later this year to gain scale as online competitors steal subscribers away from cable TV. So, yeah, it looks like they're... And Bakish apparently is also a candidate to run the eventual Viacom-CBS combination, according to the article.
Yeah.
So
also, Viacom's part owner of the company that produced Guitar Hero.
Oh, they produce Guitar Hero.
And they also have a small game studio, 345 Games. So that would also possibly give them some additional synergy.
Okay. Yeah, you're cutting out a bit again, Larry. Yeah, it shows your voice connection is going in and out. So, well, but yeah, that is pretty interesting because Viacom. I think Sumner Redstone pretty much made a big screw up when he divided Viacom and CBS. I mean, I'm sure he had his reasons, but maybe because he figured he was getting too old to manage such a large company. But it seemed like a boneheaded maneuver to divide CBS from Viacom and because basically they're competing with themselves. And plus the excuse that CBS is using for not making an actual Star Trek show, they're claiming rights issues because Paramount, which is still owned by Viacom, only has rights to the movies, supposedly, whereas CBS has rights to the TV show. So there's kind of like this weird thing going on there.
If some of the newer coverage that Midnight's Edge is pulling out of inside sources, arguably Trek brand, which is owned by Viacom.
Yeah.
And trying to dilute as to what the Star Trek brand is so they can sort of backdoor.
Yeah, basically trying to turn it into Star Wars, which
that's sort of the argument the video that they presented is making. Yeah. Why the whole thing about what is or isn't Prime and what is or isn't.
Yeah, you're cutting out again.
The trying to change canon, Kelvin, Prime, all these different terms, trying to muddy them up.
Basically, so they can make Jar Jar Abrams' version of Star Trek the only Star Trek, basically, is what they're trying to do. Which is, to me, that's just complete horsepucky because Abrams doesn't like Star Trek. He never did. Roberto Ortici, or however you pronounce his name, he was the only Star Trek fan involved, and then, that association has ended. I think if he'd remained involved and been running STD instead of Alex Klutzman, we probably wouldn't have half the hot mess that show turned out to be. But in the end, I think it kind of worked out because now we're seeing STD crashing and burning in epic fashion. And that leads us into the subject of today's video, which is we're reviewing the Orville. And
yeah.
So, let's see, we've got a review for Season 2, Episode 5, All the World is a Birthday Cake, and I'm going to see if I can do a review for this week's Episode 2, because that was also a pretty good one, but this is according to denofgeek.com. Orville
complete, soup to nuts review, talking about how we entered into the Orville going, oh no, the guy who made Family Guy.
Yeah, the guy who made Family Guy is doing a sci-fi series, and it's supposed to be like Star Trek. But here's what I found myself pleasantly surprised by was that it actually does seem to be like a very big homage to Star Trek, because what they're doing is that they're treating it like an actual Star Trek show, as opposed to, as opposed to just really kind of treating it like, just a big joke to them. But it's actually like pretty good, which I thought was, very surprising and very refreshing.
I'd also go a step further. They're taking some premises that were done by the Next Generation, but doing them better.
Yeah.
Like,
oh well, for starters, for getting their chief of security written out of the show, with the option of bringing Halston Sage back if she wants to return, but
But also the whole thing with Isaac and the Doctor dating is a better version of Data and Tasha Yar.
Yeah. Well, Denise Crosby had left the show in the first season, so we never really got to see anything like that be further developed. But All right, so let's kind of see if we can review the Den of Geek review. The big news on the Orville is that Alara has been officially replaced by Tala, a character who's of the exact same species, so seemingly has a harder edge, and the actress is a little bit older, too. The bigger news, though, is that the show seems to be back on its feet after a few muddled episodes. Unlike the last couple of outings, this is a true return to form, mostly because the concept is totally original and pro-science at the same time. And, yeah, because what happens is the crew lands on the planet Rigor 2, which practices, according to Den of Geek, they call it a form of eugenics by ascribing certain negative personality traits to astrological signs. And basically people born under a certain sign are considered violent, criminal, and therefore ostracized and removed from society, basically by being placed in these camps until they die off or whatever. But the way that these people are treated, it's like it's a society itself that's actually exhibiting those traits because of the way that they mistreat the people who are born under that zodiac sign. Okay.
Nationalism sort of parallels you could draw. It's really any political ideology or religious ideology or something.
Okay, yeah, you're cutting out again.
An unreasonable. The astrology in that episode is really something that could be any ideology taken to an unreasonable extreme.
Yeah, and what I found interesting is
unifying ideology.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on. Yeah, because
it's about how it's important to sometimes have the unifying ideology to advance your culture.
All right, and I just lost you again. Yeah, your microphone keeps cutting in and out because I'm actually half of what you're saying.
Yeah, it's an internet connection issue because I'm losing.
All right, so your internet keeps cutting in and out then.
Yeah. So it's about how it's important for ideology to sometimes advance a species, but not at the price of its own humanity.
Okay, yeah. Well, what I found interesting is that I don't know how much you're
aware of
the 80s, where the Reagans actually took advice from an astrologer and used her advice to determine public policy, which was quite disturbing in a lot of ways because this rip-off artist kept making recommendations that were like obvious, that they were pretty obviously designed to cater to their personal political prejudices, and so it kind of like they're using that as justification for coming up with policies that were completely stupid and very destructive too.
Is the I forgot what they actually called the term in the Orville right now because I'm completely blanking on the union.
Yeah, the Planetary Union.
Because when somebody says, "Hey, are we alone?" you should go answer because there are worse.
Yeah, I kind of lost you there again, but
well, I was talking about how when we had episodes like this in Star Trek, it was always very clandestine and very
there was the idea and
to bring other planets into the alliance, so to speak. But in the Orville, if you ask, "Hey, is there anybody else out there?" they will come to you and say, "Yeah."
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting.
We'll find you.
Because I had watched a video by Steve Shives actually just last night about whether the Prime Directive is really such a good idea in practice. In theory, yes. I mean, because there's
this was used an idea,
right? And the idea behind the Prime Directive is that usually when a more advanced civilization provides technology to a species that hasn't developed it on its own and learned how to use it responsibly yet, bad things tend to happen because it's kind of like giving nuclear launch codes to a chimpanzee or to a 5-year-old basically. because
Yeah.
that 5-year-old's not going to appreciate the ramifications. And look what happened when we began using nuclear technology. I mean, how radioactive is the planet now after so many Chernobyls and Fukushimas, and that's just the peaceful
I think
application.
another element to this is that there's all sorts of sci-fi that talks about the game theory of how different
Okay, just lost you again.
and that if you contact, they'll come after you. But then there's another school of thought that says, wait, being cooperative is a much more efficient use of resources.
Right, which
Show up and say,
yeah, and right, and a lot of it is kind of like anti-Randian philosophy, because if you remember Ayn Rand, or however pronounce that degenerate's name, uh, she was all about how primitive societies were cooperative, and like the evolved societies are individualistic to the point of being like, she considered it a virtue if you were a psychopath and had that
I
empathy,
also like
or
how they threw in at the end a whole little uh, biblical allegory.
yeah,
Where
yeah, and
I kind of thought that was a nice bit of writing there.
yeah, because spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the episode yet, but the way that they came out of the situation where that they make a fake star in order to convince the people of Rigor 2, to really kind of change the idea. But it's a way of kind of like letting the society keep its ways, but kind of forcing them to change, because now they have to admit, okay, well, and because the whole reason this astrological sign was considered damaged to begin with is because one of the stars in the constellation that represents it exploded and changed it thousands of years prior, and so they took that as a bad omen. But now that the star has reappeared, now they have to go back to that
That
original
changes
way.
everything.
Right. So it's like, right, and the article, it says, and I'm going to quote here, if the crew of the Orville can mess with the horoscope of an entire planet, who's to say you're getting any kind of real information about your astrological sign either? I'm not saying we have the technology now to convince people stars are there that aren't really there, but it's something worth thinking about the next time you start to make life choices based on your sign. Because what happens if...
But what's very interesting is at the end of the episode, they actually talk about we just lied to an entire planet.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that...
by the time...
Yeah, by the time they find out that the star is fake, hopefully they'll have developed to the point where they don't actually need astrological signs to get by. But it's one of those episodes where they deal with their version of the Prime Directive in a way that it kind of harkens back to the season 1 ender, where Kelly accidentally helps a child on this alien planet they're visiting, that the planet phases in and out of our universe every 11 days, but for them, like 700 years pass. So by the time the episode ends, they've sent Isaac to try and convince them, because they're in their version of the 21st century by that point. So they sent him back to try and fix everything, and so when 11 days pass and the planet comes back, they've already kind of surpassed the planetary union in terms of technology, and but they kind of explain to Kelly, well, you know what, there's really no harm done, because even if it hadn't been you, we still would have had this primitive religion, because it's just part of our normal social evolution, where like we, once we reach a certain level of technological development, we abandon some of our more destructive ways based on religious belief or whatever.
Yeah.
But then we get into last week's episode, which was a happy refrain, and we get into a bit of development with Claire, Dr. Finn, because she and Isaac start dating. And it's actually handled in a way that I think was actually pretty well done. Although I think Tom Connors over at Midnight's Edge had his issues with it because I guess his opinion was.
I like how Isaac doesn't have emotions, but it's clear relationships with others. Holiday. So
Right.
it's kind of interesting that it's the first time I've ever really seen him take the logical, no emotions character and actually find a way that it makes sense.
Yeah, because with Spock you can kind of
Which is
with Spock you
different.
can kind of cheat it because he's half human, and therefore there's this kind of struggle. And with Data on the Next Generation, they kind of had to cheat it a lot because
with Data.
Anytime he developed like he expressed emotion, it was usually because he was under the control of another entity or because something went wrong with his programming, or just whatever.
Never really cleared him emotionless.
Right. And I always kind of felt that was kind of a cheat because it's like, yeah, but someone who's supposed to have a positronic brain, would it really be such a stretch if he didn't develop emotional capacity on his own? Because the artificial brain was designed to act like a real brain, and that it would form new connections and as he went along. So, but with here, Isaac basically is reacting, and the way the actor playing him reacts in this, both in the suit and when they take him out of the suit as a holographic disguise that will allow him to interact with Dr. Finn on a more intimate level. That to me really kind of showed the range here and the writing of the episode. It really.
They actually put.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you cut out again.
Yeah, they actually put thought into their having a relationship and what that would actually. Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, because with Data's Day, I think that was the episode of TNG. The guest actress who then played the mother on Alien Nation. But she, Michelle something, I forget her name, but it was basically, by the end of the episode, the relationship is over and we don't see her again. But with this one, it's actually more long term. It's like, and I kind of like that because they're not having that cheat where, oh yeah, Isaac and Claire go back to the way things were. No, they're actually going to try and make this work. And I think it'll be interesting for future episodes where, there's room because Isaac is, for all intents and purposes, functionally immortal. As long as he's kept in good repair, he could last for 1,000.
What I thought was in for show up.
Yeah.
Well, I was kind of fascinated by that. Just like,
Okay, we lost
having that you can have an orchestra on the actual Enterprise in the holodeck, but having actual people show up seemed much more significant.
Yeah, and what I found really good about that is, you don't have that cheat because, especially on the Orville, which is supposed to be a mid-level ship, it's not going to have all the amenities of a much larger vessel where you could have a special room set up exclusively for concerts and other stuff. So, yeah, they have to kind of find ways to be creative with what they've got, and using the shuttle bay and having the backdrop of space because you've got that force field, which is a whole other risk level, I think, that could be explored at some point because you've got a force field preventing the atmosphere from being blown out into space, and now you've got this whole other problem. It's like, what happens if that were to happen and you're putting on this big social event where like you've got like maybe 100 people. But I also like the idea of Singing in the Rain, which is the Gene Kelly song from the movie being used and worked into the story because Dr. Finn actually is a big fan of Rain. So, I kind of like how they really worked worked all this into that.
I mean, it was also a little bit of a hokey, almost sitcom-y romance thing, but
Yeah, because you've got Isaac. He's dressed in like khakis and a dress shirt, and then again he goes so far as to create a holographic version of himself in order to more directly interact with her. And so, it's kind of nice to see the actual actor behind the mask kind of come out of his shell, literally,
yeah.
and interact. Because he's actually not a bad-looking guy. I mean, I'm straight. I'm not attracted to men at all. But he seems like the sort of person who'd be able to do all this, and to have it be believable. And because Claire, obviously, she's more open-minded. He's. Yeah, I also kind of like the way he is trying to actually court her. Goes to recreating her favorite restaurant. He corrects himself where previously he had downloaded
Everything about it.
Right, everything about her, so that he could go ahead and kind of learn everything he could about her. And then when she remarks it kind of takes a mystery out of everything, he goes ahead and deletes those files, so he has to actually get to know her again. And then the way that they kind of resolve this, I thought, again, was pretty brilliant, because you had this thing where he actually makes a mistake, which apparently is generated by the fact that his mental processes have kind of gotten used to having Dr. Finn in his life and interacting with her sons, because she's a single mom and he's been kind of like being like a quasi father
figure
to her sons. So he basically, it's kind of like how Data's engrams get used to people, and basically it's like, yeah, he needs her in his life in order to function at optimal levels. So he actually, and I found this was pretty hilarious, but also kind of very touching at the same time, where he actually messes with the environmental controls to make it rain on the bridge, and everyone gets soaked. But instead of people getting mad, they're kind of like, and then Gordon, Malloy, he goes ahead and says, "Man, we have got to be the weirdest ship in the Union," because there's a side story where Malloy actually convinces Bordas to grow a mustache, which I thought was hilarious, because it's like, on the one hand, with all that prosthetics, it shouldn't work, but somehow it does. And it kind of makes him look a lot more 70s than he really should. And then there's the kind of reaction where his people are either laughing at him, or his husband is complaining about it, and his son says, "I like it, Dad." It's like, okay. But this is the kind of thing that I really like about the Orville. It's that they are not afraid to poke fun at themselves, but at the same time, they also know when to take themselves seriously. And there seems to be this huge difference in
this problem that we hear right now. They don't know how to make fun of themselves, but still take the...
Yeah, kind of like STD. They just take themselves way too seriously, which, considering what a joke their production is, it's one of those things where it's like it's not meant to be funny, but it comes off hilarious because of all the errors that they make. Like, I remember the one episode they actually had Mary Sue Burnham holding a phaser backwards, and this is supposed to be like, they don't even know how to hold a Reagan prop correctly, because no one thinks to pay attention to any of this stuff, and so you end up looking silly. But there is a huge difference, though, I've noticed, in critical reaction, because if you look at season 1, and I've got the Rotten Tomatoes score up for season 1 up here, they only give the Orville 65%, but then fans gave it a 91%. And then you contrast with season 2, and let's see if the page will load here. And that's taking that's kind of taking a minute to load the page. But season 2, audience score is 100% and audience score is 93%.
Well, I think, yeah.
And so
I think one of the big differences between season 1 and season 2 is they just dick jokes and they wrote it off. They thought it was just going to be Star Trek with dick jokes, and they wrote off the show.
Yeah.
Before they watched it.
Yeah, and then I don't think the critics were even really watching this stuff. But there's episodes like, for example, you get Primal Urges, which, from what I understand, Fox was going to do like 13 episodes for the Orville for season 1, but then decided there's like something happened, they changed their mind, so they went ahead and put one of the season 1 episodes into season 2. So, and I'm thinking that would be Primal Urges, because this carries over from About a Girl, where it kind of follows up on Borda's Hatch is a rare female member of the species, and then the way they resolved it was Clyden insisted on having gender reassignment surgery performed as it was on him, and then making the child male, and Bordas kind of resents him for that, so he ends up in Primal Urges.
Getting a porn addiction.
Right. And so what ends up happening is Clyden tries to divorce him the Mocklin way, which is to plunge a knife into his heart, which obviously is not the best solution to the problem, but it all kind of stems from Bordas being unable to accept what his spouse has done to their child, because if you remember About a Girl, the ending scene, they found a Mocklin female who had remained female because her parents hid her away, and it turns out she was masquerading as the planet's foremost literary writer, and no one ever knew it until then, and that kind of like throws their entire society into disarray. So but the way they're the way they handle the character interactions in this show, I mean, a lot of it, you can tell there's a chemistry there that just is not present on STD, where the actors on STD, they're only there because they're collecting a paycheck. They're just reciting their lines. You can tell they're struggling against the material, and of course the way the scripts are written, it's like it's not believable. But here, again, there's this contrast between what you are expecting from Seth MacFarlane versus the reality, which says, okay, we're not gonna do what you're expecting. We're gonna actually blend comedy. I mean, basically, it's their love letter to Star Trek: The Next Generation. Whereas STD, well, let's just say
it insists upon itself.
If you see, I'm actually started out a homage to classic Star Trek, but I think it's really starting to develop its own signature voice.
Yeah, it is, which is only normal when you have a show like this, because
I'm not saying it's thick. I'm saying it's going in the direction that it's developing a voice.
Yeah, because it's kind of like what Geddy Lee from Rush was describing on originality. It's like when you've got so many influences that they all kind of blend together and you kind of forget them all, but then you kind of use those influences and find your own creative voice, and that's what's happening with the Orville. And the way they wrote out Halston Sage's character, Alara, again, they left the door for her to return if she wants, but it kind of deals with, you had Robert Picardo playing her father, Molly Hagan from Herman's Head, and also had a guest stint on Star Trek Deep Space Nine as a Vorta. And then you also had John Billingsley, who played Dr. Phlox on Enterprise, had a guest starring role. And
Picardo and the guy who played the Doctor from Enterprise.
Yeah, John Billingsley, yeah. So, no, it's either John or Chris Billingsley, I forget which. His last name is Billingsley. I had to look it up because I never really got into Enterprise, so But I recognized him, and I was like, "Oh God, yeah, that's him." But the way they handled writing her out, and again, this is a, like you said, they take the same things that Next Generation did, but do it better. Because like when Denise Crosby left the Next Generation, they simply killed off her character and didn't bring her back until a few seasons
And
later.
this was all about and this was all about her character getting a chance to finally have a real connection with her father.
Yeah,
and
because there's this touching scene at the end where her father
a large part of it was
never
all
really made any effort to know who his daughter was and what her talents really were, because Alara, because apparently Salians are very highly advanced, very scientific species that kind of frowned upon more militaristic societies, and so they don't think much of her career choice. But she actually ends up saving the family, and her father's kind of forced to confront the bad way that he treated his daughter. But there's also some
and I
because
like
the mother's
how
kind of mediating between dad and daughter, and then the sister actually confides to her that she actually is impressed because her sister gets to go out and see the rest of the galaxy, and she's just like doing what's expected of her. So it's like this kind of dynamic where it's like the black sheep of the family actually isn't who you think it is.
And I also, Ed came to a nice little conclusion, if it is a conclusion, at the very end.
Yeah, because they come up with an effective treatment that lets her keep her strength. And also that they found a plausible reason for why she had to go back home in the first place, which has to do with the effects of being in a low gravity environment or zero gravity on a physical body. Because astronauts up on the space station, they stay there. They can only be there for like 6 months, and then they have to come back and reacclimate to Earth's gravity. But because it kind of destroys your muscles and your bones over time, as your body adjusts to it. So they actually had that in that episode, and I just thought it was really great how they were able to resolve that, and at the same time kind of say, okay, you know what, we're going to find a more plausible explanation for why things happen in the show that maybe the Next Generation could have done better, but at the time it seemed like a good idea. But now you're doing it on the Orville, and you've got the benefit of like 30 years of hindsight where you can kind of say, yeah, that might have worked for the time, but now it doesn't work so more, and audiences are a lot more savvy now than they were back then, and they're not going to forgive some of the bullshit explanations we try to come up with as writers for why people do things on a show. So we and I kind of think that's a good thing, because we are as an audience more sophisticated. We've kind of grown up since the 1980s, and now we're more willing to call bullshit on stuff that kind of insults our intelligence.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing what a third season of the Orville will look.
Yeah, and that is something I'm definitely going to be looking forward to going in. So anyway, I'm going to cut this video for now, because we've got some other stuff to get through, and I think we've kind of discussed all we're going to be able to discuss for the Orville, because because we can do like a whole series review. I think once season 2 is over. So anyway, this is Michael Wilk and Larry Bernard for the Wilk Report. If you like what you've heard and you want to hear more, feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to receive notifications whenever we upload new content. And also head over to our Patreon and subscribe to our pages, become a donor, help us improve the quality of the podcast and keep the lights on. Any parting words, Larry? Oh, Larry, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm so.
Okay, yeah. I'm thinking you're microphone is cut
Yeah.
off again. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get those issues resolved for next time. So anyway, this is Michael Wilk and Larry Bernard for the Wilk Report saying take care, good night, and we are out of here.